GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode 119.
Episode 119, people.
It's the Buffalo Bills at Detroit Lions for the second time in 5 days. The Buffalo Bills headed to Detroit, headed to Ford Field. Two different opponents in 5 days. One hell of a swing. Before we get started, though, I'm Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. John is at I Am JC Money. He is my co-host. He is John Cimino. You can hear us on BetterLiveThanDead.com, GearNetwork.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well to stay up to date on the latest podcast. Now, John, how was your Thanksgiving, man?
Thanksgiving was pretty great. I watched football in bits and pieces. I can't lie, because I had the kids on Thanksgiving and we were going from one place to another and then had to drop them back off here and then had to come back here. And so I did a little bit of traveling, but I did a lot of eating, a lot of drinking, and I am now doing a lot of yoga and what cardio I can do
out
to work off all of that, because I am almost in the clear from my ankle injury, which means a return to the ring coming soon. But all in all, a good holiday weekend. How was yours?
I ate way too much food, which is what you're supposed to do. Those are the rules. I watched a lot of football, which also you're supposed to do. And I even went shopping a little, but, all remotely because I don't like people. I don't like going out in public. And I think that, Black Friday it's a government construct, my man. I'm kidding. We're going to start this podcast off as a conspiracy theory. I had a good time.
Aaron Rodgers.
Look that's a good call. I spent time with my wife. I spent time with my daughter, who it was her first Thanksgiving, and she seemed to absolutely love Thanksgiving. So now we are looking toward Christmas, which last year Christmas I wasn't able to spend my daughter's first Christmas with her because of a COVID scare. So this year we're going to make it extra special and celebrate twice as hard. She'll know no different. Very good. But we're going to have a good time.
I'll tell you what, the holidays hit you different as a parent, don't they?
Absolutely. Because I'm super excited. It's not even about, it never really was about me, to be completely honest, because I'm always, very much, me. I'm very much looking at, like, if you have a good time, I have a good time. But now for me, I'm watching my daughter and my wife and watching them interact. And I'm like, this fills my heart. I'm so excited. This is so awesome.
I will tell you what, I can't remember if you're a Halloween guy or not, but when the baby gets big enough to costume and walk door to door for trick or treating, man, you become a big Halloween fan again. I didn't care when I didn't have kids. I didn't care really about Halloween. I'd hand out candy or whatever. But man, now with kids, they're getting very creative with their costumes and going out, and that holidays mean so much more now.
Absolutely,
as a parent. And I think it comes in stages. Like you're in the beginning stages of parenthood where everything is brand new, right? And it's so cool, and you're seeing how the eyes light up when she looks at the tree and the tree lights and things like that, right? I'm in the stage now where my kids are getting older, and soon enough they're gonna, as much as I hate to say it, soon enough, it may not be as cool to go out and do this or take part in this or whatever. So I'm kind of milking that for as much as I can before the next stage, which is, okay, well, the holidays are coming. Who's coming over for this or who's coming over for that? So it's really, I see why the elder statesmen in my life get very sentimental around the holidays.
Absolutely. My daughter's eyes light up when she sees the Josh Allen tree topper, points at it and says, Dada. And I said, no, not so close. Not so fast, I said, you're close though. I told my dad last night, I said, Dad, she says Dada but she really needs to know that we all refer to Josh Allen as daddy in this household.
And
He thought that
I'm
was
gonna leave that one. There's a BLTD after dark joke there somewhere with reference to Josh Allen and the word
That's all
dada,
good. That's all good.
or daddy. But we'll leave that be.
Well, hey, John, for the second time in 5 days, as mentioned, our rundown here, Buffalo marched into Ford Field, found themselves leaving with a victory. They're the first team in National Football League history to win 2 games at the same venue, which is not their home field, within 5 days or fewer. Spot Track was quick to go for the throat. They pointed out Buffalo has as many wins in Detroit now this season as the Lions do, which is 2. Buffalo improved to 8-3 for the third time in 4 seasons. It's Buffalo's 4th straight win over Detroit, the longest current win streak against one team. Buffalo improves to 6-4-1 all time on Thanksgiving. Now, we're going to talk about the game as we go on, but I wanted to get this idea out now before we get too far and too deep into this. As the injuries pile up, both offensively and defensively, more specifically defensively, which we'll talk about later in the podcast.
Yes, that was a big one.
I'm thinking that it's kind of time for a reset for Bills fans and expectations. The thought here is that Buffalo is going to need to lean on their offense more as Josh Allen gets back to 100%. And you need to stop relying on your defense. You need to stop expecting your defense to win you games and essentially lower expectations to the defense doesn't need to win the game. The defense needs to keep the offense in the game and maybe steal a drive or 2 away from the opposing team. There will be games where they will dominate for sure as they get healthy. But right now, I mean, we'll talk about the injuries as well later in the podcast, the injury report later in the podcast.
Which seems to grow longer and longer by episode.
Yeah, absolutely. But things seem to, again, switch. It's like you have to switch those expectations because you look and you're like, wow, the defense is struggling. But then you're like, okay, they're on 4th and 5th string defensive ends. They've got cornerbacks who are, depth guys who are starting playing against, Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra St. Brown. And you're like, holy crap, they're getting nuked. So again, expectations need to be adjusted. But with that being said, John, I think it's fair to roll over to our 3 big things.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
And our 3 big things are brought to you by PuckLuck.com, your one-stop resource for all your NHL sports betting action. PuckLuck provides win percentages and score projections for each and every National Hockey League game to tilt the ice in your favor. Not sure what to bet or just in a rut? Not to worry. PuckLuck also provides expert picks to get the puck bouncing your way. Please note, though, PuckLuck.com, no way affiliated with the National Hockey League, its teams, or the NHLPA. PuckLuck.com provides data related to gambling and cannot guarantee the success of any suggested or related wagers. As always, please gamble responsibly. Now, running down the offensive stats, John, Josh Allen, 24 of 42 on Thanksgiving, 253 passing yards with 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, which I don't necessarily think was, if I remember correctly, I don't think that it was his fault, but at the end of the day, it goes in the book as an interception. Either way,
those happen.
He also had 10 carries for 78 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, got a lot of big things that happened for Josh Allen, so I'm just going to run them down, and then we'll get your thoughts on Allen's performance.
Sure.
Josh Allen now has 163 total touchdowns. It's 126 passing, 36 rushing, and 1 receiving in his first 5 NFL seasons. Trails only Dan Marino, who's at 171 total touchdowns in his first 5 seasons. 36th career rushing touchdown for Allen ties him with Michael Vick for 7th most rushing touchdowns all time by a National Football League quarterback. Josh Allen is the only player in National Football League history with 125 or more passing touchdowns and 35 or more rushing touchdowns in their first 71 starts. Also, Josh Allen becomes the first quarterback in NFL history to win the Thanksgiving Day trifecta. He's won a game in all 3 time slots. 2019 defeated the Dallas Cowboys in the 4:30 p.m. time slot. Last season, they defeated the New Orleans Saints in the 8:20 time slot. And then this year, obviously, they defeat Detroit in 2022 at the 12:30 time slot.
Also, when you mentioned that, not to cut you off there, but I wouldn't mind, honestly, how the tradition is Detroit and Dallas always have their respective time slots. Mm-hmm. I would not be against Buffalo owning that 8:20 slot annually.
I think it depends on who the Bills would play or who the Bills play schedule wise. But if it works out where they play Dallas or they play Detroit, you play them against those guys. But then again, you look like next year and you think to yourself, okay, so if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, the Bills and Eagles are going to play next season. if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, you could put Bills Eagles to start the season. If they don't win the Super Bowl, you could put Bills Eagles on Thanksgiving, because again, you want the most eyes, you want the best game, because that's how they make their money. So
That's
again,
very true.
there are options. The Bills have opponents whom they can play on Thanksgiving. They play the Chiefs again next year for the umpteenth time in a row. Again, that's a
I think
great
that'll
game.
be an every year game like Pat's Colts was during the Brady Manning rivalry.
Well, right now it just breaks down that way, but it's like a common opponent. But as time goes on, I know they will finally roll back, because it feels like every game is in Kansas City. They will at one point roll back to Buffalo. I can't remember what year it is, but there will be a Kansas City Buffalo game in Buffalo. But to continue, Josh Allen's the first player in NFL history to have 3,000 plus passing yards and 500 plus rushing yards in his team's first 11 games. Allen has recorded a passing or rushing touchdown in 20 straight games, the third streak of such kind in franchise history. Allen set the record last year at 21 straight games. Doug Flutie, the other player, had 20 straight games in the 1998-99 seasons. Allen completed passes to 7 different Buffalo players. He led the Bills on a 48-yard drive with 21 seconds remaining to set up Tyler Bass's game-winning 45-yard field goal. And, John, we give Tony Romo a lot of credit because he's very good at his job. He was mentioning that, quote, 95% of Allen's issues are due to his injury, which is interesting perspective from someone who's been throughout the NFL ringer, injuries, playing the games. He was an NFL veteran. He played very well. He can communicate with players very well, and he picks up on things very well. So I do believe a lot of that. I am buying into a lot of that, but it does seem like as time goes on, Josh Allen's elbow gets better, the Buffalo Bills offense gets better, the Buffalo Bills get better.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree that with 95% of Allen's issues are being due to the injury. I think, prior to his injury, he had quite a bit of interceptions, early on. He threw, I think, 2 or 3 in the first game. He was completely healthy there. So I don't necessarily, I know it's easy to say, yes, the injury is the cause of this. And I would give him that some of the issues are the result of the injury. I can't imagine that, throwing the football 42 times a game with an elbow that, 2 weeks ago they were thinking was going to have surgery and could possibly be missing the season isn't painful. So I would give that, some of that, some credibility, but to say that 95% of his issues are due to the injury, I don't think so. He tends to get flustered. He tries to make plays where there aren't at times. He's guilty of trying to do too much and wears it on his face. So there's that factor too. So I don't necessarily know that I would say 95% of the issues, but a good deal of them.
That seems fair. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs, 8 receptions on 15 targets for 77 yards and 1 touchdown. 84 receptions in 11 games sets a new franchise record, breaking the former record set by Diggs last season, or in 2020. I'm sorry, he had 80 receptions through 11 games. Diggs becomes the first Bill in franchise history to have 3+ consecutive seasons of 80+ receptions. He had 127 in 2020, 103 in 2021. Here's a fun stat for you, John. Mm-hmm. Per Next Gen Stats, Allen's pass to Diggs on the game-winning drive, which that right there defines a big-time quarterback making a big-time play. You don't have Josh Allen under center, you're not making that play. That was a crazy pass to Stephon Diggs. It traveled 31.9 air yards at a speed of 54.3 miles per hour. So he's still putting a zing on the ball. Again, it's just he's because the elbow may still be hurting him. Again, I feel like I don't know that we're ever going to have an honest answer. We know he's hurt, but will we know when he's healthy? I don't know that they're going to try to keep that under wraps because they want you to think he's still hurt. Because then it gives you an advantage. But
remember those years where Tom Brady was always on the injury report?
Yep.
And yet he was doing fine and all of that, but he still showed up as questionable.
Gamesmanship.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be surprised if that was it too. But keep in mind, for as much as Josh Allen, big game quarterback, able to make that throw too. Stephon Diggs, man's game, man. He's big game Diggs himself. I think that yes, you need a Josh Allen to make that throw at that time. But that said, I think any competent quarterback, as long as he could hit Diggs, having Stephon Diggs in that position in that time frame is also a big factor into that. Plus, they're just, you keep in mind too, Stephon Diggs was brilliant in Minnesota, wanted to come to Buffalo specifically to play with Josh Allen. Those guys have a rapport. I think Josh Allen could have thrown that left hand and figured out a way to get it to Diggs, or Diggs could have figured out a way to get to the ball. They're just that in sync.
Yeah, it's amazing to. I feel like you said you need a Josh Allen to throw that, but you needed Stephon Diggs to catch it for sure.
Right.
Wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie had 6 receptions on 10 targets for 96 yards and 1 touchdown. McKenzie stepped it up on Thursday afternoon, recording his second highest single game total in his career. Yards wise, I should say. His career high was 125 yards at New England on December 26, 2021. McKenzie was an important part of the Buffalo offense, which certainly made the offense more dynamic. They didn't put up as many points as you would have thought they would. But then again, you just have to score enough points to win the game, which brings us to Tyler Bass, kicker, 2 for 2 on field goals, 2 for 3 on extra points. He had kicked 104 consecutive extra points prior to Thursday's miss. He did record his 101st point on Thursday. He has 100 plus points in all 3 seasons and is the 5th player in franchise history to have 3 straight 100 plus point seasons. But John, here's the fun part. It's almost like the missed extra point ended up playing into Buffalo's hand because Detroit only needed a field goal to tie. So they were pushing to obviously get a touchdown, but when their drive kind of stalled out, they're like, okay, we'll just kick a field goal. We'll tie it. Buffalo's defense bent, but did not break. They held Detroit to a field goal with time remaining, which then allowed Josh Allen to come out, do his thing, get the Bills in field goal range. And then Tyler Bass went out and kicked that 45-yard game-winning field goal. So again, it's sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I remember us saying that repeatedly 2 or 3 years ago on this podcast. Better to be lucky than good. This would fall into that category. The Bills are definitely more good than lucky, but sometimes Lady Luck does strike the rich too. So
I mean, because who would have known?
This might even be. Go ahead.
Yeah, if he made the extra point, who would have known if Detroit would have been able to even march downfield and get a touchdown? But that the pressure would have been on a lot more because they need that touchdown. So I've never played the National Football League, so my thought is that I would have to presume that it kind of took some pressure out. But then again, I don't know.
Yeah, you never know. If at anything, it feeds the narrative we're preaching here.
Absolutely, and that's all we like. We got the narrative, and we're gonna push it as hard as we can, which moves us over to the defense. Second of the 3 big things this week, wrapping up the defense. Defensive tackle Ed Oliver, a man on Thanksgiving for damn sure. Mm-hmm. 6 tackles, 4 solo, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and 1 sack, which was a safety. It was the first Thanksgiving Day safety since Ndamukong Suh on Thanksgiving in 2013. Oliver was an absolute force on Thursday, picking up where he left off last Sunday. And it really seems like, John, that Ed Oliver loves to play on Thanksgiving in 3 career games on Thanksgiving. 14 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a safety. For his efforts, Oliver was named the AFC Defensive Player of the Week, and something that dropped earlier today from the Bills PR. Again, a great follow on Twitter. Ed Oliver became the first player in team history to record a sack, forced fumble, fumble recovery, and safety in a single game. He's only one of 4 players in the last 10 seasons to record this stat line, joining Khalil Mack in 2020, Justin Houston in 2019, and Cameron Wake in 2013. So Ed Oliver is stepping up and stepping out, and we'll talk about Von Miller shortly, but Ed Oliver needs to step up even more and continue this pace of play, really, to help out that Buffalo Bills defense in a time where they are incredibly beat up.
Yes, they're incredibly beat up, and they're facing a very, very tough schedule, with the exception of the Bears. I know it's weird to actually factor in the Jets as being a team now, but really, we've got 2 against the Patriots, 1 against the Jets, 1 against the Dolphins, 1 against the Bengals. This is going to be a very, very tough stretch of football for the Buffalo Bills. Ed Oliver's really going to need to step up because the loss of Von Miller is going to be massive for them. I mean, Von Miller was a pace setter. He was, he gave the pressure where the pressure was needed, and it's a very, very big loss. You can replace a lot of little parts, but you can't. But it's tough to replace, the big parts, and Von Miller is a very big part of this defense. So,
absolutely.
Yes, I will say Ed Oliver earned his turducken or the turkey leg award, or whatever it is at the end of the game. And maybe that's why he likes to play on Thanksgiving. The boys like to eat.
Hey, whatever it takes, man. It's an impressive performance, and he has stepped it up tenfold in the past few games. He's played well all season, but I feel like the statistics have started to kind of swing back in that direction toward you're seeing him on the stat sheet and doing some impressive things as well. Speaking of an impressive performance, defensive tackle Daquan Jones, 6 tackles, 4 solo, 1 tackle for a loss, 2 quarterback hits, and 1 sack. Buffalo was able to keep pressure on all afternoon. In total, they had 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 2 pass deflections, and 10 quarterback hits. They were able to keep that Detroit Lions offense uncomfortable. And that was the most important thing, is that you're able to keep them uncomfortable. You're able to keep them, they kind of have to be on their toes. Mm-hmm. And it worked out for the Buffalo Bills.
Absolutely, it did. And you knew that Detroit was going to come forth with some offense. I mean, I know their record is 4-7 now after this loss, but it's kind of a suspect 4-7, because really, had their defense not let them down some games earlier in the season, we would have been talking about this as a big money matchup for the Detroit Lions. They know how to score. They know how to play. They have a solid offensive game plan. Certainly, the trade with the Rams for Jared Goff in the first round is only going to benefit them, given how the Rams season is going, especially if they're going to go quarterback in the first round. So for the Bills defense to play the way they did and keep the pressure on all afternoon and end up with the win, it's a great team victory for that defense, regardless of whether or not Detroit scored 25 points. You knew they were going to score their points, but doing the thing where they needed to do it in order to help set up that Josh Allen throw at the end of the game. I mean, you got to give your hats off to that defense, especially considering how depleted it is now.
Yeah, you're not kidding, man. They were down a lot. We'll talk about that shortly. I don't want to spoil it here, but moving over to our third of the 3 big things before we take a commercial break here, John, deeper into the win. Cornerback Tre'Davious White, speaking of injured players, returned to the lineup for the first time since tearing his ACL last Thanksgiving, played roughly 23% of the snaps on defense. He played 16 total plays. Defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier said White was on a snap count, but, quote, looked confident in what he was doing, and went on to say, quote, hopefully we can increase his playing time to the point where he can play a full game. I think that's the right move. I have to think on Thursday, depending on how it goes, he'll probably play, I would have to think, maybe half, if not more, of the game, just based on how he's feeling, and then going from there. But again, it's always hard to say, because you don't really know what the best way to ramp people up. Because we've talked about it too, John, where it sounds like it's a mental thing. But if he goes out there and plays those plays and then goes through the week and says, look, I feel good, I feel great, I'm ready to go. Maybe they just take the training wheels right off and he plays a full game. I don't know.
It could be. I would say if anything, this would be a good game for him to test the limits. Because yes, while the Patriots are tough and they're staying competitive, they do still have Mac Jones throwing the ball, and he's doing better than Russell Wilson this year, but that's not saying much. Mac Jones at this point in time, 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, seems to be very, very hit or miss against a tough Buffalo Bills defense. Regardless, Sean McDermott, very defensive minded. Leslie Frazier, he'll get another head coaching opportunity. But right now, one of the best defensive coordinators in the game at this time, he knows how to get them boys playing. I trust his judgment. But I do think against a Mac Jones-led offense, this would be a game to test it a little bit and see, can we do half a game? Can we do half a game and some change kind of thing with Tre'Davious White? But certainly taking the ginger-like approach with upping his reps and getting him to a full game approach, now is the time to do that. The Bills are 8-3. They're firmly entrenched in the playoff race. Barring catastrophic destruction and everybody getting injured like Thursday, I can't not see this team making the playoffs. So to have a player like Tre'Davious White take baby steps to get him to a point where he can play a full game in the playoffs, that's the ultimate goal. That's what they want to do.
I would absolutely agree with that one. I think it's kind of the same mindset they've had all season with letting players rest against teams that are lesser opponents. because they want to make sure that they're healthy. Because again, Buffalo, no playoff spot is a guarantee for sure. But with how the season has played out so far, it again, barring catastrophic failure or whatever, like you said, John, the Bills are likely going to be playing in January. You want to make sure your best players are ready to play those important minutes in January. You don't want Tre'Davious White going out playing 100% of the snaps against New England and get hurt when you need him to play against Kansas City or whomever in January. So it's a smart way to look at it, and a smart way to roll him back into the lineup, I think, comfortably. But we'll see what happens on Thursday. But it's positive. You take it for a guy who has not played all season. And there have been rumblings of him not being comfortable, like mentally comfortable with playing on his repaired knee. It's good. It's good progress for sure.
Absolutely. Definitely good progress.
Now, Buffalo's late touchdown, words are hard sometimes, on their 14-play 90-yard drive marked the fourth touchdown drive this season of 90-plus yards, marking the third time this has happened in franchise history. They also had 4 90-plus yard drives in 2020, and the record, I believe, is the record, 5 in 1991. Some roster moves, because the Buffalo Bills played Thursday's game with 5 wide receivers. That would be Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, and Tanner Gentry. Now, Buffalo signed old friend John Brown to the practice squad on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Smoke is back in Buffalo. Brown spent 2 seasons with Buffalo, recording 105 receptions for 1,518 yards, 9 touchdowns in 24 games. Brown spent 2021 split with the Broncos, the Denver Broncos, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, playing in 4 combined games, found himself targeted 3 times and recorded no catches. He did go on to say in one of his first press conferences with the Bills media that he was injured, beat up, so he took the time off to get healthy. Now, here's the thing, John. With Tanner Gentry out of practice squad call-ups and the Bills down to 4 healthy wide receivers, it really seems like Brown is likely to play sooner than later. Now, if you don't know the rules, teams are allowed to activate or elevate players 3 times from the practice squad before they need to be signed to the active roster to be further activated. Gentry has been brought up 3 times, which I would presume necessitates the need for Brown to play at least this week. But the very interesting thing, and again, we could be looking too much into it. I almost said Stephon Diggs. Von Miller has a weekly podcast called The Voncast through Bleacher Report. He talked about Odell Beckham Jr. Von Miller says Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be making his Buffalo trip on Friday. He'll be touring the facility, and Von Miller said, part of me thinks he's not going to want to leave, or he won't be leaving, whatever the quote exactly was. It sounds very positive. Then this morning, we get a tweet from Sal Capaccio of WGR that says, NFL source tells me the Bills restructure the contract of cornerback Tre'Davious White to now create approximately $2.5 million of cap space. They were down to a league low $332,000 before this move due to the toll of injury replacement costs and the acquisition of Nyheim Hines. Now, it could just be coincidence. Sure. But clearing $2.5 million worth of cap space 2 days before Odell Beckham Jr., highly sought after free agent, is coming to Buffalo. I'm going to say where there's smoke, there's fire. So there might be something there, especially too, because again, the Bills currently only have 4 healthy wide receivers on their team at the time. Right now. They are an injury away from catastrophic levels of failure at wide receiver. So again, John Brown will be helpful, but maybe they're going to start pulling out all the stops. And Friday, you would hope they maybe can get Odell Beckham Jr. under contract, or at least get some sort of agreement or whatever the situation may be. Because again, he wants to go to the Giants, wants to go see the Cowboys, coming to see the Bills. But I mean, it really seemed like the best fit for him would be in Buffalo, selfishly because he'd get a lot of opportunities, but also maybe he wants to go play for Jerry Jones. I don't know. But either way, the Bills need help in the wide receiver position. Starting
absolutely. Well, I think we're going to I think it's going to be between Buffalo or Dallas. I don't see the Giants as the team. I know that Odell's agent sent a Instagram story that said, respectfully asking for number 13 from whomever's wearing number 13 in New York now. But really, when it boils down to it, what do the Giants have? Do you really believe Daniel Jones is going to, regardless of who, if you're Odell Beckham Jr., do you really think Daniel Jones is going to be the one to lead you to the promised land, to lead this Giants team to the Super Bowl, where you're looking at Dallas and they're, pretty solid top to bottom there. And just look at the facility that they train in. I mean, just everything. If you're a football player, you want to play in Dallas because of what they have there. And then you look at Buffalo on the other side of it, and you're seeing a team that's there, that's got the franchise guy, that's got at quarterback, that's got Stephon Diggs and a surrounding cast on offense. You're going to get your touches. You're going to be able to score your points. You're going to be at that top thing. I just don't know that I see the Giants sustainably keeping that success. And I'm thinking it's going to be a toss up between Orchard Park and Arlington for Odell's services.
That seems fair. When Daniel Jones was playing like his wonderful nickname, like Vanilla Vic, yeah, absolutely. But the Giants, as expected, have kind of fallen to earth a little because they're, tough opponents, whatever. Maybe the league's figuring them out. I don't know. But either way, the NFC East is very difficult. I mean, it looks like the Eagles are going to take the East with the Cowboys, Giants. I mean, the thing too, Washington cannot be ignored at this point in time. I mean, they look to be very strong with Taylor Heineke under center. That's going to be very interesting to see when Carson Wentz is eligible to come back. If it ends up being Carson Wentz under center, I think Taylor Heineke is just, there's something about him with that team that works. He may not be the greatest quarterback in the league, but just something about him under center for that team works. And I don't know if going back to Carson Wentz is great, but whatever. This is a Buffalo Bills podcast, but still. The NFC East, very competitive. The AFC East, very competitive. Dallas and Buffalo give you the best chance to win. Do you want to play with Dak Prescott? Do you want to play with Josh Allen? I think that's what it comes down to, honestly. And maybe Von Miller's got more pull than we know about, but it really seems like Von Miller is pushing as hard as he possibly can to get Odell Beckham Jr. to sign on the dotted line at One Bills Drive. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whenever it is. And we'll see. We'll keep an eye out, but we would hope that the same thing for Bills fans, that Odell Beckham becomes a Buffalo Bill.
Maybe, you never know, but I feel we'll know soon.
Absolutely. Thank God the national nightmare will be over. Buffalo also signed defensive tackle CJ Brewer to the practice squad on Saturday. He shuffled back and forth in the practice squad multiple times this season, and potentially big news for the offensive line. On Monday, Buffalo designated offensive lineman Ike Butker to return to practice. He remains on the physically unable to perform list, but can be activated to the 53-man roster at any time. With some injuries on the offensive line too, that will certainly be helpful. Now, John, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Right after this, we'll be back with more Trust the Podcast. We're going to talk our look ahead. We've got injury news. We've got the preview for Thursday Night Football and more here. Trust the Podcast on the Gear Radio Network. Stick around. I'm making this too long and too wordy.
You're Italian goodbying the commercial break bumper. Let's go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And we are back here on Trust the Podcast with our look ahead. Good news, bad news, no news. I don't know. Injury news. That's where we start off. That's why I say good news, bad news, no news. Tremaine Edmonds missed the game with a groin heel injury, which the Detroit Lions were able to exploit with some slants over the middle. But he was a full participant on Monday and Tuesday, so it looks like he will play Thursday. Mitch Morse missed the game with an elbow/ankle injury. He was a full participant Monday, Tuesday. Should be good to go on Thursday, barring anything else. Defensive end Greg Russo missed the game with a high ankle sprain. Full participant on Monday, Tuesday. Should be back for the game on Thursday. Defensive end AJ Epinesa missed the game with an ankle injury. He also was a full participant on Monday and Tuesday. Should be back on Thursday. The big one, left tackle Deion Dawkins left the game with an ankle injury, did not return. He was spotted post-game with a walking boot on. He was a DNP on Monday and Tuesday. Status for Thursday currently unknown, but it does not look good because, again, you don't practice Monday, Tuesday. The game's on Thursday. You're probably not going to play, but they still say Dawkins is day-to-day.
Yeah, why not make the Patriots prepare for them? You know damn well the Patriots are with the hoodie on the other side, regardless of who's at quarterback on the New England Patriots. you do have the greatest coach to ever play the game, to ever coach the game on the other end. You know he's crafting up different schemes and strategies, so why lead him on and let him wonder, or let him plan for not having Deion Dawkins? Make up that game plan just in case. Do a little extra work there, Hoodie.
Now, the biggest news of the week, bigger than the win, bigger than any other injury, bigger than any other signing. Linebacker Von Miller left the game with a knee injury and did not return. He was immediately ruled out with a knee injury. Reports confirm, and Von Miller himself confirmed, there is no ACL tear, but a tear of his lateral meniscus. He'll reportedly wait 7 to 10 days, which, again, I wrote this before Miller confirmed it himself. He'll wait 7 to 10 days before getting his knee re-imaged. If the knee is responding to rehab and feels better, Miller will likely get fitted for a brace and return this season and get his knee fixed in the offseason. If the knee is not responding to rehab, Miller will likely get surgery and be done for the season. Sean McDermott did confirm on November 25th that Miller is out against New England, but on Miller's podcast on Tuesday night, he said that his current plan is to try to get back against the Jets on December 11th, which would be the Bills' next game, which should
have been flexed.
It should have, which might be a stretch, but I mean,
think for strategic game planning purposes, it's probably good that he said
the man is unhuman. I mean, even if he can come in and play 50% of the snaps, I mean, that's still an advantage over not having him at all.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he have a similar injury to this before? And so he's been through this kind of hoopla before. He kind of knows and understands what comes with this particular injury.
The knee, his left knee, it's his left knee, and it was the one he tore his ACL in before. Okay. But again, obviously you have to play it smart. He said you got to play it smart. But if you know you can't hurt it anymore and it just may hurt, once you get the adrenaline rush and you've got a brace on it, you'll be perfectly fine. I mean, it feels like a lot of sports injuries are either tell me I'm out and I can't play and I need surgery now, or tell me it can't get any worse and I can keep playing.
Right.
It's really those two things. If you can tell a guy,
I agree.
If you can tell a guy I'm going to get a shot, or I'm not going to get a shot, I'm just going to play through the pain. Either way, you get that adrenaline rushing, you start to run on it, you start to loosen it up, get the blood flowing. It's after the game when it's going to suck, but during the game, you should be fine to play through it. Limit the snaps, make sure he's comfortable, and just listen to your body. But it really does seem like Von Miller does not want to be out a long time. It seems like the knee is responding appropriately. They obviously have to get that imaging done to verify, but all in all, so far, positive news out of Buffalo, out of Von Miller's house regarding the injury, but still a big blow to the Buffalo Bills defense if he can't return.
Absolutely. A major blow I would argue a major blow. And that's kind of feeds the earlier point where we were talking about Ed Oliver having to step up a little more, because at this point, you don't really know whether or not you're going to have Von Miller for the long haul. Obviously, it's nice for him to say, hey, I'm shooting for December 11th, but let me offer some perspective from someone who's still pretending to be an athlete here. I wish I had this ankle injury in June of last year. I was targeting September. That didn't happen. I was targeting October. Pretty sure I could be in October. That didn't happen. I'm like, I have no idea then. You know what I mean? And right now, it's definitely in trajectory for December for the all clear for a January in-ring return. But when the point I'm trying to make is that when you have injuries like this, yeah, the athlete can say, yeah, this is what I'm targeting. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. There could be a setback. There could be something that within the rehab part that they were not predicting or projecting or figuring out. For me, it was maintaining balance on that right ankle. I had strengthened it good. I was feeling good. I was feeling okay. But when it came to balance exercises, I couldn't hold my balance and I was tripping and falling like I was drunk. And that set everything back even farther. So it's nice to hear that, what his current plan is, but whether or not that's the actual plan remains to be seen.
Absolutely. And that seems totally fair because, again, the Bills like to play it safe. Sean McDermott likes to play it safe, but you can't argue if Von Miller wants to come and play in the lineup, especially in a game that's going to be very big for the AFC East, for the Buffalo Bills playoff hopes and playoff seeding.
For sure.
Another injury, another big injury.
I'd say rest now, because you're going to be in, again, like we talked about, barring catastrophic destruction. At least they may not get home field advantage. I believe that's going to be going through Kansas City, to be perfectly honest with you. But as long as you're in the playoffs and you're playing the meaningful football in January, rest up in December. We're hitting December now, and this is, yes, it's meaningful football, but the Bills have a comfortable enough lead and an advantage to where they can afford to take a couple games off from some of their big players, whether or not that's, you're playing the Jets and they're tougher this year, and the Patriots twice and the Dolphins again. You're still kind of in that hole or in that lead where you're going to be in the playoffs one way or the other. Like, I can't see them missing the playoffs at all. You still have Sean McDermott coaching. You still have Josh Allen, your quarterback. You still have Stephon Diggs on the offensive side of the ball. You got them ballers up there on the offense. They're going to keep things afloat.
Well, and I would say
play smart.
I would agree with that. I think, too, with Josh being hurt, we've seen the worst of what it's going to be, and it's just getting better from here, because either he's getting more comfortable with his elbow feeling the way it feels, or him getting comfortable with the way he has to adjust his play. I think that'll be perfectly fine. It's just, again, you have to change the mindset that the Bills have to go through they have to become an offense first team. They have to think, we are going to live and die by this offense, because the defense, it's not that you can't trust them. You just don't want to have to trust them because they're so hurt, and you're going to put pressure, an insane amount of pressure, on second, third, fourth string guys who is like, just do your job and the Bills will be fine. Instead, you got to make this play. You got to get, 3 sacks in the game. You got to get 2 picks, whatever the situation is. Like, no, you just have to do your job and the offense will take care of it.
Right. Absolutely. I agree there. And, hopefully that'll happen. That'll occur. Still plenty of football left to play. To your point about Josh Allen and how he's dealing with his injury, another athlete perspective is, even if you're hurt, but you can work around it, you work around it. So he may not have, he may not be 100% healthy. He may be 60% right now, but he knows how to work around that, 40% deficiency to make it work for him to keep the train rolling.
Well, to get the most out of it, for sure.
Exactly.
You find a way to work around that deficiency, like you said, to get the most out and be as effective as possible.
Right. Right.
Christian Benford, cornerback, placed on the IR on Saturday with an oblique injury. He will miss at least 4 games. That's the rule. Cornerback Xavier Rhodes signed to the active roster from the practice squad. He played against Cleveland in week 11, played 33% of the defensive snaps. And John, again, we've talked about it, but this is my line for the segment. You can't predict injuries, but this season feels full of extra bad luck when it comes to injured players. The Bills, knock on wood, have been very lucky for a very long time with devastating injuries. And it almost just seems like right now, you've reached the point where all of that luck, all of that injury luck, is now starting to catch up with them. Again, you can't predict ball. That's why you play the game. But it just seems like the Buffalo Bills are extra unlucky this year in that department.
It seems like there's one team or 1 or 2 teams every year that fall victim to this. I remember Green Bay being a team that had this issue a couple of years back. I certainly remember when the Patriots had these issues, and even the Jets had these issues too early on, and things like that. And it just appears that, there's no other way to put it. Maybe it's Buffalo's turn this year to kind of go through that. But yeah, you're right. This team, where I feel like a few podcasts ago I was like, no, don't worry about it. Injuries happen, but they seem to be happening an awful lot. And I'm wondering how much of that is equated to this, the rise of this turf versus natural grass playing field debate that's been going on this season. I wonder how many of these injuries are related to that.
And I wonder, and I think too, it probably won't help the Bills at all this season, because, it's almost December. Tomorrow is December 1st. Tomorrow the Bills play the New England Patriots, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's a situation, I think, where Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and company are smart enough to say, look, what do we have to focus on this offseason? Okay, well, if the Bills bring back Tremaine Edmonds on a big ticket, and they go, okay, we need to have a guy who can fill his role if he gets hurt, or maybe we need to go a little deeper at cornerback, a little more veteran depth at cornerback, or hey, maybe we need more veteran depth at offensive line or something like that. You can look back at these injuries and say, okay, how do we play with this guy out of the lineup? Or how do we play with that guy out of the lineup? Or, if Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are out, can we go out and get veteran depth or solid young depth that will make the drop off? Because again, you look at players like that, like Tremaine Edmonds is a very talented linebacker. Again, I don't think the Bills should pay him what he's worth or what he feels he's worth, but he's very talented. He's worked very well for this team, kind of grown into the role. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, there's no way you're replacing people at that level, because if you've got players playing at that level and they're on the bench, they probably will end up playing anyways because they're so good. But looking at like the cornerback stuff like that, I think the Bills may have gotten a little burned by injuries early on. Offensive line, that's why you have a big offensive line room to kind of shuffle guys in and out and keep people healthy. But again, you can't predict this. You couldn't go into the season and say,
right,
you're gonna have half of your defense not playing because they're hurt.
Right. You go into here, but here's some devil's advocate perspective that I think I can offer that may perhaps offer some comfort. But I seem to recall, I believe it was our off-season podcast, or maybe it was one of the preseason podcasts that we had, where we had talked about all of the different additions to the Bills lineup and them building the depth that they did. They're, even in spite of all of these injuries, they're still, believe it or not, a couple of fluke plays away from really being 10-1 right now at this point. They're still 8-3. They're still
That's
doing
the craziest part too, is because
I think that what they did in the offseason, not saying that, they, predicted that they were going to have this many injuries, this consistent, amount of injuries, but I feel like they did a very good job of preparing themselves in the event that something like this happened, because they're still, 8-3. They're not maybe running away with games 8-3 anymore, but they're still 8-3. They're still doing the thing.
That's the one thing too, John, that we've always tried to talk about, whether the Bills are good or bad. We always try to be subjective. We always try to read between the lines and pick up on things that people may not be thinking about or may not want to focus on. So it feels ridiculous to sit here and critique the Bills when they're 8-3, because sometimes I feel like I lose sight of that record.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm putting the stats in the podcast. I'm writing the podcast. I'm like, Josh Allen was ineffective, or whatever was ineffective, or this guy sucked, or whatever the situation is. And then I go, but the Bills moved to 8-3 on the season. And I'm like, oh, this seems kind of out of line. But that's kind of the podcast we've tried to foster here. Like the environment we've tried to build is that, yes, we're going to celebrate the great things this team does, but the only way to get better is to look at what you've done wrong and how you failed to then grow from that. So again, the Buffalo Bills are really good. They're probably going to make the playoffs. I can't say I guarantee it, because the AFC East is really good this year. Yes. And the Bills have a very important stretch of games where they play the AFC East coming up.
Right. Yes.
So again, we'll know a lot more in a few weeks, probably around by Christmas, at least, maybe mid-December at the earliest. But again,
I think at this point, it's a matter of where they're going to be placed.
Exactly.
Because there's a very, it's an outside shot, but also it's there's a pretty good chance that this could happen where 3 teams from the AFC East make the playoffs. So
yeah, absolutely.
To your point about the AFC East being a tough division this year, top to bottom. Yeah, it's weird and it's fun, oddly enough.
Like you look at it, can the Bills continue to truck along and win the games they're supposed to win? Can the Jets catch lightning in a bottle with Mike White and go on a winning streak here? Can the Dolphins handle the pressure of now they're being, they've been flexed into Sunday Night Football? There's a potential that the Bills Dolphins game the week after is going to get flexed into Sunday Night Football. So the spotlight's going to be on them. They're going to be eyes on the Miami Dolphins. Will they be able to handle the pressure and not slip up? Those are all very valid questions. So that's why this has become such a fun, not only fun season, but a fun podcast, because we can kind of talk about, okay, well, yeah, it's there are still opportunities for all this stuff to happen. It's not I mean, I don't get me wrong, John. I would rather be, Bills being 10-1 and going, hey, the season's over. They're going to the playoffs. They're going to clinch the East, whatever. But it's exciting to talk about this stuff. It
is.
It keeps things rolling here.
You want to hear a funny tweet that Brandon sent me earlier today?
Sure.
He said, how bad has Russell Wilson been this season, you may ask? So bad that he got Patrick Mahomes flexed out of primetime.
That's hard to do.
It's very hard to do. But they don't call him Mr. Unlimited for a reason.
He's unlimited in terms of.
I don't like to make fun of people with their, in their times of need or misfortunes or whatever. But I mean,
he's a millionaire.
Wilson kind of did it to himself, and the jokes are so freaking funny about the Russell Wilson trolling of this year has been an absolute highlight of NFL coverage this year.
I agree with that.
I just felt all
the let's rides and all that's killing me. Absolutely.
Let's ride and we let Russ cook, and you see the house is on fire and those types of things. I
absolutely love all of it. But it is amazing.
And now I will say, for that aforementioned game that was flexed, while sentimentally, not only for the sake of this podcast, but for the sake of both of our respective off-air fanhoods, I would have preferred the Bills and the Jets if flexed to the NBC game, the Sunday night game, because quite frankly, that would be a major test for the Jets, having all eyes on them. Are they ready for a spotlight that big? And I think that was the logic behind the, ask of CBS to have the game moved. CBS saying, no, we're not going to, we want to protect this game because we want our ratings to be good too. They know that that's going to be a must-watch game. Quite the flip-flop from Bills versus Jets game, any of them from the past 4 years.
Yeah.
But certainly, I selfishly, I would have loved to have had it on Sunday night. Now, I prefer CBS's presentation and broadcasters over NBC's, don't get me wrong, but man, would that have been a good Sunday night game to watch.
I agree. Hey, talking about good games to watch. Week 13, Buffalo Bills at the New England Patriots. Thursday, December 1st, 8:15 on Amazon Prime. John, it's the first time Buffalo and New England have ever met on a Thursday night. New England 6-5. They are fourth in the AFC East since 2020. Buffalo has scored an average of 30.4 points per game against New England, while holding them to only 16.4 points per game. New England's scoring offense is 18th in the league, scoring 21.7 points per game. They are sixth in scoring defense, allowing only 18.4 points per game. You mentioned Mac Jones' stats earlier. He has missed some time with a high ankle sprain, but the thing to me that stands out, the QBR, 28th in the NFL at 35.1. The Patriots defense is the Patriots defense. I don't know that their offense has much of an identity under Matt Patricia, who never was an offensive coordinator, an offensive mind, always was defensive. Whatever Bill Belichick's doing is crazy. I'm just going to go out there and say that I think the Bills are going to win this one. It'll probably be 24-17 or 24-21. Either way, I've got the Bills beating the Patriots on Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you on that one. I think it'll be a nail biter, honestly, and I'll keep it the same score there, 24-21 ish, 72.1% according to ESPN Analytics, my favorite matchup predictor thing that they have here. 72.1% of America believes Buffalo is going to win, which actually comes in a little lower than what came weeks before. Virtually every Buffalo Bills game. So it seems as if America is beginning to feel that Buffalo might be running out of gas, which is absurd to me, or maybe that the injuries are impacting. But I don't see the Buffalo Bills losing this game to New England, even though Foxborough is a very, very tough place to play. And when you're playing the New England Patriots in December and there's meaningful football going on, Hoodie tends to get his folks ready to play and game to play. So I expect a hard hitting game. I expect the defense to really challenge Josh Allen with that injury, but ultimately I do expect the offense to prevail, the Bills offense to prevail. And I will say 24-21 Buffalo wins.
Sounds good to me, man. I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. John is at IMJC Money. John, thanks again for joining me as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. As we always say, we are Trust the Podcast.
You're not.
We will catch you sometime in the next few days. It's like a mini bye week almost, because the
Almost.
Bills then go to, what is it? They go play Thursday to Sunday, I think it is. Yeah, Thursday to Sunday, because they play the Jets on the 11th. So there's a chunk of days off for the Buffalo Bills. So at some point in time, we'll be back to talk about the Buffalo Bills, about the Patriots, about the Jets, about everything Buffalo. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and go Bills.
Mr. Unlimited.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.